University of Michigan. She says negative emotions get people to act in particular ways or what she calls specific action tendencies. That's a college way of saying getting them to do what you want them to do. Positive emotions don't necessarily narrow people towards a specific action like negative emotions do. In a classic study, Daniel Kahneman was awarded the 2002 Nobel Prize in Economic Sciences by something called prospect theory. And essentially what he did is he looked at given the opportunity to make a dollar by investing or to lose a dollar, people would opt to not lose the dollar and keep the dollar they had as opposed to taking a chance and making a dollar. And it's a much more complex than that, obviously, to win the Nobel Prize, but essentially that's what it was. So people would rather protect what they have than take a chance to do something more. So they're more motivated to hold on to what they have, which means if by that action they're not going to go and take any chances or take advantage of opportunities, which is kind of interesting, isn't it? It means people would rather, fear of loss is greater than fear of gain, than motivation to gain. Another way of looking at it. Okay. So, when you're looking at trying to engage people's emotions, you really want to focus on what's the negative emotion here that I can play off of. Now, thoughts or questions about any of that?
I have a question. You talked
Okay,
about
let me get you the mic. 1 second.
Now, you've talked about attaining a visual response right away, and that's in-person selling. What do you do if you're selling on the phone?
You try to paint a word picture. And I might do it this way. It's the only way you got since you're on the phone. I might say something up front to try and engage you in the pain process. Deb, I work with salespeople who are frustrated because they're not making up sales. They're upset because of blah, blah, blah. They're concerned they don't have enough prospects in the pipeline. And they're downright angry because they're giving lots of presentations to people who do nothing but beat their brains out and steal their information. So which of those can you relate to?
I usually say all of them.
Yeah. Well, we don't have but 2 minutes, so which one you want to talk about first?
Okay.
So I just very earthy language, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sick and tired of people beating their brains out by taking their proposals and stealing their information, shopping it all over town. You're like, damn right I'm pissed off about that, right? Okay. So I just kind of painted a word picture for what I'm doing is I'm entering into a conversation she's already having in her own mind. Because if she's in sales, I know she's dealing with those things because she deals with them every single day, and so does every other salesperson. So those are problems salespeople are having, right? Frustrated because they're not getting enough prospects in the pipeline. Upset because they have to cut price in order to make a sale too often. They're concerned about where their business is going to come from, and they're downright angry about people stealing their proposals and shopping all over town, never making a decision. Real quick, and it painted kind of a word picture. So that's about the best you can do. Okay. In person, you are the visual kind of thing. So, good question, by the way. Good. Well, I'll just hold the case. All right, other questions or thoughts about this? What are you doing? What are you doing to engage your prospect immediately and get their attention? Do you have an opening shtick to engage people? If you don't consciously have one that's designed for effect, then you're losing a great opportunity. Paul?
Well, believe it or not, I actually use my dress. I wear shorts and usually a Hawaiian shirt or something nice and bright because we are in Florida. Most salesmen are dressed like Steve when they walk in. When I walk in shorts and, you know, a casual shirt, we start with the engage of the conversation, and they're not expecting that.
Right.
And then we build that relationship from there.
Okay, that's good. That works well. You're different than everything else they're experiencing.
Exactly.
And that's what you want to do. Okay? If it works for you, that's terrific. Now, because of the people you're calling on, the type of clientele, if you were, say, in the banking business and you were a banker and you were calling on veterinarians to get them as a small business client, you probably wouldn't do that. But for what you're doing, that works perfectly for you. So it's all, you know, I don't believe in dress for success. I believe in dress for your prospect. So that makes sense. Yeah. Dress for your client. Yeah. Okay, good.
I have sat in Fred Levin's office dressed in shorts and
Yeah.
a Hawaiian shirt, so.
Okay. So did you get the business?
Yes, we did.
Okay. Works. All right, good. All right, other thoughts or questions about that? Okay. All right. Now, if you think back to our process, if you think back to our uncovery, as we go back to this, and we talk about first we're going to do uncovery, not uncovery. We're going to connect with people. If you're looking at the new school process, an acronym for it is CUDD, C-U-D-D. Actually, there's an S. The C is for connect. Connect is where we're going to get trust and credibility. It's where we need to spend the bulk of our time, because without that, nothing else is going to take place. Every one of these has got to be checked off before we go to the next one. If we've connected with someone and we're doing uncovery, and in uncovery we're talking about pain, and we're talking about their decision process, the next thing we're going to do is talk about their money. Or you can actually switch these around. You can talk about money and then you can talk about decision. So now think about how much time we've spent talking about pain in this whole session. A big chunk of time talking about pain. And yet if we go back and look at this, most of the whole day that we're spending is on connecting and uncovering. We're not going to do any with the rest of these. Because you're going to go back and design. You know how to go back and design. That's something you do. You design the solution to their problem. Then you're going to go back and deliver. And then you're going to service after the sale and give them more than they expected. You know, those aren't training issues. Those are things that you provide. So really, the bulk of our time and the bulk of your time on a sales call is spent in the uncovery phase. Once we've done the uncovery with pain, we want to make the transition to money. And I want to go back to John again. Pick on John again. Poor John. Not poor John. John's getting his money's worth today.
That's right.
Okay? So now, we all know from previous role play that John's got a $1,000 a month problem. Okay? So when it comes time to talk about money, I'm going to position the cost of the solution against the cost of the problem. Now, how much money would you be willing to invest on a monthly basis to solve a $1,000 a month problem?
Less than $1,000.
Less than $1,000. I get that answer every single time. So some fraction of $1,000, right? Hopefully closer to 100 than 1,000, right?
Sure.
Sure, okay, makes sense. Now, if I did not know that his problem was costing him $1,000 a month, if I didn't know that, and I just came up with this is how much our service is going to be, he's going to have sticker shock, because that number is compared against zero. Got it? If I tell you it's $197 a month to solve a $1,000 a month problem, if you believe that in your heart of hearts that you would get a 5-to-1 return on your investment, what would you do?
Sounds good.
Okay. All right? Anybody in their right mind is going to say that. All right? Now, what I need to do is, John, what do you need to see or hear to be convinced that we can help you solve the problem? And he's going to tell me what he needs to see or hear. So what would you need to see or hear
Proof
to be
would be great.
Proof would be great. And how would that proof be? Would you need to talk to some other people? What would you
Sure.
need to do?
Yeah, that would be good. Talk to.
Okay, there's some other people in here you can probably talk to that'll help you with that. So I'm asking him what he needs there. But my point is, we're not going to get into what the investment is in our product or service until we first talk with him about how much the problem's costing him, so we have a benchmark here. See, $197 a month to solve a $1,000 a month problem is a reasonable investment, is it not? If we haven't talked about the $1,000 a month problem, and I tell him, hey, our sales training is $197 a month, and we hadn't dealt with that $1,000, we hadn't put that on the table and talked about it, he's going to think, what? That's a lot of money. Much more so than if we position it against the 1,000. So when we talk about money to solve the problem, we want to talk about it in the context of how much the problem's costing. That's why we must get the prospects to do what I call do the math. Make your prospect do the math about how much the problem is costing them. It's called quantifying the problem. And that needs to be in your questioning process when you're going through the pain with them. Everybody, does that make sense to everybody? Do you see why you have to have this stuff down so cold? Because you can't do this stuff and think about the next step at the same time. If you don't know it when you walk in the door, that's too late to try and remember what to do. That's why practice, 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 over and over again. And like Les, the minute you check out and quit practicing, you become a backsliding sinner and you're going back the other direction. No matter how good you are, you'll go back to old habits and ways of doing things. So, in terms of showing me the money, here's a couple questions for you. Have you ever given a quote or presentation to a prospect and then have them tell you they do not have any money? Of course you have. Of course you have. What was that like?
What did I just spend that time on?
Yeah.
Wasted all my time.
Wasted all your time, okay? It's even worse when you leave here because you know there's a better way of doing it. And then you go do it next week, you're like, damn. Yeah? After preparing a quote or proposal, your prospect doesn't return your calls. Probably never happened to anybody in here. Not more than a few dozen times a month. Okay? Your prospect decides to go with a competitor because their price is lower. Relate to that? Your prospect takes forever to make a decision. Deals that should close in weeks take months. Your prospect tells you the project has been put on the back burner. You go through all your process and give them a proposal, give them a presentation, and they tell you, yeah, this is nice, but you know what? We need to put this off till next quarter. We need to put it off to Q3. You're like, and you know, of course, time kills deals. That hardly ever really materializes. Sometimes, 5% of the time, on average, about 1 out of 20 times. Just enough to keep you hooked and keep you full of hope to keep doing that. Sort of like cocaine. A little bit goes a long way. You don't have to do a little bit at a time. You know, keep you hooked. Okay? Your prospect tells you that it's more than they wanted to spend and other things are a higher priority. And you're thinking, why didn't you tell me that before? I spent all this time giving you the proposal. Don't get mad at them because you didn't flush that out of them up front before you gave a proposal. It's not their fault. It's your fault for not dragging that information out of them because you were in too big a hurry to get to giving a presentation. Because you were so thankful you have nobody else to talk to. You're like, oh God, at least I got somebody to give a presentation to. So that becomes a prospecting, marketing issue, not a sales issue. Your prospect lies to you about what's in their budget. Your prospect gets your price and then uses it as leverage with his incumbent vendor. Somebody tells me they need to get 3 quotes. And I say, which one am I? Number 1, 2, or 3? I said, well, we've already had 2 quotes. We'd just like you to be our 3rd quote. My response to them is, no, Jay, let me ask you this. I get the feeling that you would like a quote from me, the 3rd quote, to justify a buying decision you've already made to do business with somebody else. Is that what you're doing to me?
No, not necessarily.
Not necessarily. Okay. Now,
Liar.
yeah, and exactly, liar. Exactly. If he tells me, if he says I'm the 1st quote, I would say, Jay, I get the feeling that you're going to take my price and compare it against 2 or 3 other prices that you get. Is that what's going to happen with my proposal?
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily. So, and so now we're into that thing. Now we're going to flush that. The point is, I don't just agree to do that. And there are a lot of different ways you could play that. And a lot of different ways. But you've got to ask that kind of question if you think that's being done to you. Suppose I came in and gave you a quote. I'm the 3rd one, Jay. You've already gotten 2. Let me ask you this. You've already seen 2 quotes, right?
Okay.
Okay. My greatest fear, because you've not made a decision to do business with either of the first 2 that you've already been given quotes by, right?
Right.
Okay. Those quotes are still sitting on your desk somewhere.
Right.
Okay. My greatest fear is that I'm going to come in and mine's going to end up in the same stack and you're not going to make a decision about mine either. Is that kind of how it's going to play out?
No, I don't think so.
You don't think so? Okay. Let me just ask you point blank. When I come in and give you a presentation, can you give me a yes or no answer on the spot?
Well, sure.
You
I
can.
already have the other 2 quotes.
Okay. You can write me a check or give me a purchase order.
Sure.
Okay. I can come back and do that. But one of the things for you to realize is I'm not going to leave a proposal. If you tell me no, if you tell me anything other than yes and sign the agreement, then I don't leave a proposal behind like these other guys did. Are you okay? You're okay with that?
Sure.
So I mean, you just play it however, and you never know how it's going to come out. That's why you got to know this stuff so you can. It's like spontaneous. You've got to be able to go with the flow of what they're going to do. See, I know what I'm going to try and do. I don't know what he's going to say. He doesn't have the script. I didn't send him a script ahead of time to tell him what his answers were going to be. And I'm not a mind reader, so I got to be prepared for any and all eventualities. And I don't have time to go, let me refer back to page 27 of my manual. It's over, it's done. So you got to be able to play that out, okay? Now, when you are, again, when you are trying to deal with this money, you've got to position it against the cost of the pain. Why don't we do that? Why don't we have open and honest discussions about money? Why are people, particularly salespeople, hesitant to discuss money? Go back to the belief systems issue. The reason we deal with belief systems early is I can teach you 16 ways on how to ask these questions. But if it's uncomfortable for you and it goes so much against your belief system about being rude to have those conversations, you will get tongue-tied and you will never do it. So what we have to do is we have to work on your mindset over and over and over and over again to reprogram your thinking so you can actually do the stuff we're teaching you to do in terms of techniques. What do we want to know about the budget? When you're talking about money, what do you want to know about their budget? What are all the things you want to know?
A, if I have one.
A, you want to know if they have a budget.
Is there money in there to be able to make a decision?
Not only is there money, but how much money?
How much and when is it available?
When is the money available? Funds release process. What's your funds release process? When's this money going to be available?
Are you in charge of the budget?
Okay, are you in charge of the budget? Who's in charge of the budget? If it's not you, who is it?
If your company does buy something, what is the process they go through?
Decision process.
Yeah.
What is the process that you go through when your company does make a purchase?
Okay. How do you go about making a decision about funds? You got to flush all those out. Who, what, when, where, why, how do you guys go about this whole budget thing? The one thing you leave out and don't get that piece of information is the one thing that's going to come back and bite you in the butt. You definitely payment terms. What would be the payment? You got to have all those discussions. You got to get it all out on the table. If you forget to ask when is the money going to be available, they're not going to volunteer that piece of information. They're going to let you proceed because they want to pick your brain for information anyway. Remember, they don't want to divulge anything to you. It's like poker. They're not showing their hand. They're not going to show anything. And if you don't ask that question, you forget to ask that question, or you assume that the money's available now, and you don't ask that question, you give your presentation, and they say, this is great, we love it, it's the greatest thing since sliced bread, we love you, we love you, we love you, but the money's not going to be available until next quarter. And you can't overcome that. There's nothing you can do except say, well, I'll see you next quarter. I mean, the time to deal with that would have been beforehand.
So
Okay.
in that case, if they tell you they don't have it from the onset, where do you follow from there?
Okay, if they don't have it from the onset, then depends. We go back to their pain. How acute is their pain? Would you have the money available if you had to have a root canal? Would you find the money? Would you rob a bank if you had to?
Or you, yeah.
Yeah. If you have a small child and you like that small child, and I held that small child, I used to say off the top of the World Trade Center, but I can't do that anymore. If I held him over a tall building and said, you bring me money or I'm going to drop this kid, you would find the money. Now, if it's a teenager, you would say, who cares? Drop him. Let him go. Okay? Let him go. All right?
Come and tickle you.
Right.
See, drop.
So that's why you have to go back to the pain. That's why you have to really get down in that pain to find out. People will find money for what they want. There's no such thing as no money.
Well, it kind of maybe ties into the money and the pain. If the amount of money they're
Sorry?
it may tie in a little bit to the money and the pain. If they're losing a lot more money than they thought they were, they might come up with it sooner.
Your job is to take a minor issue and turn it into a mountain. Find a molehill and do what I call explode the pain. Make it greater than anything they ever imagined possible. Where they're thinking, oh my God, I was doing okay.